Welcome back to another episode of Video Editing Systems, a podcast where we talk about any kind of systems that make us better editors, filmmakers, or content creators. My name is Devin Dennis. I'm a remote video editor living in Argentina, and we're back. It's been a while. I think it's been like about 6 months since I uploaded the last podcast. I'm going to be completely honest. When I started this podcast, it was something fun to do, and I had a lot of free time because I didn't have that much work. I was a little worried that maybe I'll have to go back to teaching snowboarding, but everything worked out, and everything is awesome. I've been swamped for the past 6 months, and that's why I haven't made a podcast. I actually have another editor working for me, Ese. He's editing this podcast, so let's hope I speak well for him. And if it sounds good and looks good, thanks. Shout out to Ese. If he wasn't doing this, I wouldn't be able to make this because there's a lot going on. So if you want us to edit for you, let me know quick because my calendar's filling up, which is awesome. I'm really excited. I've got a whole bunch of new episodes to put out. I've got a list of guests I'm doing new podcasts with. But I figured the best way to start 2026 is an episode I probably should have started a long time ago, and that is my workflow, how I make wedding videos. I edit wedding videos. I also edit podcasts and YouTube videos and corporate videos, but more than anything, wedding videos. And this structure, this workflow that I've developed, it doesn't depend what kind of video. I use relatively the same workflow. I developed this workflow over the past couple years, and the more that I get into working with other editors who edit a lot, especially wedding films, I realized that they more or less follow the same structure. But yeah, I figured I would share my workflow. And so let's jump right into it. This works for any editing software. I'm going to be in DaVinci today. I also use Premiere. I haven't been in Final Cut. I know it's very different than the two of them, but I'm assuming this structure is more or less it will work in Final Cut as well. So yeah, so first step, you download files, right? You get the client to send you files. I work with Google Drive, Dropbox, WeTransfer, and FileZilla. All FileZilla, Google Drive, and Dropbox, I have them all set up so that I can sync the files and they download automatically, which is wonderful. If you have slow internet, which I don't have the best internet, if you can only download like 50 gigabyte files at a time, WeTransfer, you can usually download more at a time. I don't recommend it. But if you need to transfer bigger files, that's a plus to WeTransfer. I'm going to give you as simple as I can make it, step by step, my workflow. When I do these weddings, sometimes I'll combine some of these steps. It's not as literal. And there's also other workflows that I think other editors tend to use that I don't really like. Sometimes I'll use certain things. I'm going to explain those as well, explain why I don't personally like them. I work off of two different SSDs, and my file structure on the SSD, I have each year, so 2026, then Q1, quarter one, and then a list of folders of all clients. On my desktop, I have a blank video folder with the folder structure for all of the projects, and I drop that in, change the name to the new project, and inside that folder, this folder structure that I have is number 1, footage, number 2, assets, number 3, project, number 4, exports. I download the footage directly to the footage folder. Then assets is going to be all the music, the voiceover, all of the lav mics and everything goes there. Project folder, if you're in Premiere, you save the project there. If you're in DaVinci, you need to remember when you finish the project to save to the project folder so that when I put it on the hard drive for cold storage, I still have it and I don't lose everything that I did, just in case something happens. Exports is obviously where everything goes. If I need to show how it's going so far or the final export, that's where all the exports go. Next step, I bring footage and assets into DaVinci. I've got a wedding that I did for Zenaida in an island in the north of Italy. Very pretty place. Lots of crazy fireworks and stuff. It was awesome. When I open a new project in DaVinci, I've got also a template with all of the folders, but basically footage and assets is they're the first two bins that I have. They should reflect the folders, footage, and assets in the wedding video, in the file structure in Finder. Next, in DaVinci, I also have a bin that is timelines, and that's where all of my timelines are gonna go, all the working timelines and everything else. So I drop everything into footage, drop everything into assets. I number everything again, so it's 0, 0, everything. So I drop everything into everything. And the first step, the first thing that I do is I color code all of the clips. I go through every clip and everything gets a color. Every clip gets a color so that I know what type of clip it is. If I go into my timelines bin, I have B-roll. And in B-roll, again, I have everything. That is where I put all the colors. I've gone over this before on the podcast, but my colors that I usually go by, especially with weddings are pretty much always the same. The girls getting ready, everything with the girls is light blue because it's the girls. Then dark blue is the guys getting ready. Dark green is the scenery, everything that's green, all the plants and everything. Teal is anything with the bride and the groom together, portraits and things like that. If it's just the two, if it's family as well, when all the portraits and everything, it is teal. The ceremony is a light brown, and then ceremony details and everything, like the flowers and the altar and everything, that is a light brown. Those are the two for the ceremony. Dinner is a mango or apricot, like an orangey type of color. Party is a lime color, and then drone is purple, and A-roll. A-roll is pink. So I give every clip a color, and then what I'll do is I'll put every colored clip into its own timeline. So I've got all of the girls' clips in their own timeline, all of the guys' clips in their own timeline, ceremony, together, portraits, location, dinner, party, and drone. A-roll as well. I don't know if I mentioned A-roll. A-roll's up there too. Next step, which I usually do the coloring and this step together, is pulling the selects. What I do pulling selects, I'm a believer and hypocrite of watching everything in real time. I think a good editor watches everything in real time, but I don't do that. Uh, I try to get as close as I can. When I started out, I definitely watched a lot more in real time, and it took me forever to do selects. Now I scrub through and I pick out the parts that are smooth, the camera's smooth, real short clips that I'll be able to use in the highlight video. I watch the waveform as I'm scrubbing through to see if there's any sound bits that I can use. That's one of the things that watching everything in real time just makes it, you really know that you're getting the best footage and the best audio. And I think sound design is really, really important for a video so that you can feel the video. It depends on the client that I'm working for. I don't think I have a client that doesn't like sound design, but they just don't care. So I go through the selects as carefully as I can, watching for smooth shots, shots that are well framed, important shots where important things happened, and also watching the waveform and looking for sound bits as well. I do that as I am coloring all the clips. So I go one pass through all of the footage, color the clips, and pull the selects. What I do when I'm pulling selects is I will make a cut, make another cut the part that I like, and I will push it up to the next track. I just like doing this because I can go back and see what I selected. If I want something similar but not as similar, like I can see if there's more footage there. You can also just do it in the media pool, and you can look at it that way. But I just like doing it that way. So next, once I have everything in their own timelines, all of the clips sorted and selects sorted, I go to the A-roll and I align everything, all of the different camera angles for the ceremony and the speeches and the 4 different lav mics that I have and the DJ. Everything that I can align, I align there. I should mention, if the client films with their cameras synced with a time code, this is amazing. This blew my mind when I figured out when I learned this. You can import everything into the timelines according to the time of day that it was filmed, and it'll line up automatically. It's so nice. You can also align the audio and the video in the media pool. I just find it's the easiest way is to do it by hand, put everything in one timeline, because sometimes when you do it in the media pool, you end up with 5 different audios underneath and you don't know which is which. I'm sure if I looked at it better, I would be able to figure out which one's which, but this just kind of works for me. I make sure that I don't miss anything. I don't miss any audio. Yeah, this is the way that I do it. I drop everything into 0, 0 everything, the first timeline. From everything, I line up everything, all of the different camera angles. Each camera angle gets a track. You've got track 1 is the first camera angle to the right, second a different camera angle, and then third is sometimes the floating camera that's moving around. The same for the audio tracks. I try to keep them organized. I forgot to mention, when I'm doing the selects, I don't do the A-roll. The A-roll all gets pushed to the side, and then I'll do that in this step. The next step is, once I have all the A-roll lined up, I go through and I do the same process as I did with the selects. Now I make selects for the A-roll. You go in through the A-roll and you start making selects of the things that I like that they said. When the officiant says things I like, the kiss gets bumped up, all of the speeches. I start picking out what parts of the speeches and what parts of the vows and everything that I really like. And also, depending on the client, some people like the rings, some people like, sometimes they tie the knot, all the things that they do, that all gets its own select, and then it gets pushed into another timeline where now I get to pick music. I start to download music. I put the music into the assets folder in its own bin, and I start adding music. Once I start adding music and making the storyline, I try not to play too much with the volume of the music. This one that I have pulled up, it has punch-ins and outs with the music. I try to just make the music low enough so that I can still hear the music and hear the beat, so I can also listen to when they're talking, but I don't go too crazy with the sound design yet. This one I did because I had to show the client how the storyline was before I started adding B-roll. So this one I went to town on it, but sometimes I line up instrumental and non-instrumental music. Like this one has one song that I didn't end up using the instrumental. They liked it with the lyrics, but sometimes if you download off Artlist or MusicBed, or I think just about all of them, you can download an instrumental version and a version with the lyrics or with voice. And it's nice. I like for B-roll sometimes to add in the voice and then take out the voice when there's A-roll talking over it. So I go through, I start adding in the A-roll, start figuring out the storyline. I'm not adding in B-roll yet. I just leave space for the B-roll, and I keep in mind all the selects that I pulled, because if I'm limited with what B-roll I have, I need to know how the story's going, what part of B-roll will go into certain gaps in the A-roll. Sometimes I even put in titles or markers that will say this B-roll would go good here, just to remind myself later on. Once I have the A-roll all set up, I go through again. I do clean up the audio. I use a little bit of the AI for the voice, as little as I can. I try not to, because you hear it. And then I put in as well, like, just all kinds of sound design. This one has birds and lake wind ambient sounds, some whooshes. Sometimes we got to put in some laughter. If I can get laughter from the actual wedding and I don't have to add in stock laughing or stock applause, even better. But sometimes I do, and I punch it real low so you don't really notice that it's stock laughter. Next step is to start adding the B-roll. So when I'm adding B-roll, what I typically do, I don't like pancaking timelines. If you put a timeline over another timeline, because I started in Premiere and you can drag and drop from timeline to timeline. So that's what I always did before I went into DaVinci. I would have, like I said, my different timelines of all the selects of the girls, the guys, and the ceremony and everything. And I would drag and drop into my working timeline, my B-roll timeline. Now that I'm more in DaVinci and you can't drag and drop like that, what I like to do, this might be because I have a 27-inch screen. Maybe if I had a bigger screen, I would pancake, but I feel like no matter what, I like all the real estate that I can have, and I feel like pancaking timelines, stacking timelines over one on top of each other, it just takes away from your real estate of your screen, and I don't like that. When I'm adding B-roll, what I typically do is I will go in, let's say I want to add B-roll of the girls getting ready. I'll go through and pick the selects. I like that one. I like that one. I like that one. All right, I've got 3 there, and I will drag them, highlight them, drag them all to the end, close the gap, and push it up 3 levels, and then I will copy and paste it to my working timeline. Okay, there it is. That's where I drop the B-roll. I drop it on the third or fourth track, depending on how much A-roll I have. The A-roll, I just leave as is. I will cut different camera angles when I'm going into the B-roll, the working B-roll timeline, but I will always leave each camera in the track that it's at. So I always know which camera I'm looking at. If I'm looking at the third one, the second one, or the first one, I've got those 3 tracks, and those 3 tracks stay like that. The B-roll goes on the 4th track. The first 3 are the A-roll, or first 2, or first 4, depending on how many cameras there were. Another thing that I didn't mention, I make a new timeline for every one of these steps. Music took me 6 different timelines. And every time I change something drastically, I will make a new timeline in case I don't like what I'm doing and I can go back to the other one. So I make a lot of timelines. B-roll as well. Once I start adding B-roll, this is the 3rd B-roll, and this has everything all the way through. I try not to go too crazy right now. Right now, the idea is just to fill in the B-roll. If it's not perfectly on the beat, it's not a big deal. Generally, I do follow, especially now with DaVinci with this new, if you haven't figured out to add beat to songs, it's incredible. It's so nice. But adding in B-roll just so that I can get a feel for how everything's looking, what shots can go where. Generally think about screen movement, and if the camera's moving one way, moving the other way. I will reverse speeds because there's certain shots that if someone's walking backwards, you're gonna be able to tell. So I try to do that as I'm adding in the B-roll as well, so that I know the shot's gonna work backwards and all of those kinds of things. Some slight graphic effects, maybe. If I think there's gonna be a cool Luma fade or some kind of a wipe or something, I might add it in here. But in general, I try to save all of that for later. Again, I might add in a title to remind myself that I could do this here, I could do that there. So yeah, B-roll first. Next step would be, you've got B-roll 1, 2, 3. By the 3rd one, I'll go through and I'll make sure everything's on the beat and everything's clean and everything looks nice. After that, I will frame the shots. So make sure that if the photographer got in the way, or if there's certain parts, or if a camera's a little crooked, all of that gets done in this step, in this timeline. I will frame everything. Next, I will stabilize shots. Again, sometimes I'll do this before just to see if it works or if I need to slow things down. Now I will stabilize any kind of shaky shots that need a little bit of stabilization. If it needs a lot, then I'll probably just either leave it shaky or use a different shot or maybe slow it down. I should have mentioned when I'm framing the shots, I'm also doing, if there's any kind of punch-ins that I want to do, any kind of zoom-ins, any Ken Burns effect type of things. So now I've got everything framed, everything stabilized. Now I'm going to start playing with color. Sometimes. These next 3 steps, they kind of all go hand in hand, and it kind of depends. And I also like to color first because the more I go through, the more I can see if I got something, if something's a little orange, a little blue, something has way too punchy, too contrasty. As I'm doing the following steps, I can keep tweaking and adjusting the color. So next is color. Now what I typically do for the color is like I said before, I have all 3, the first 3 tracks are the A-roll. I will disable the 4th track and up. I will disable all of the B-roll tracks and just leave the A-roll tracks. And I'll color grade those first because they're going to be very similar, but there's going to be a lot of cuts. When you open it in the color page, it's going to look like there's a whole bunch of clips, which there are, but they're all relative to the same original clip, the same source clip in Premiere. So what I do is I edit remotely. I use remote grades. Usually you're using local grades. That means you're color grading every clip by itself. You go to use remote grades, which means you make one change to one clip and it'll adjust all the other clips that came from that same source. That way I don't have to edit so many clips, and there's probably only like, I don't know, 6 clips that I actually have to edit. Again, in Premiere, you just go to the source tab. When you go into the color tab, there's on the top, you have your individual clip or your source, and you edit in the source clip. So I do that first. I do all of my A-roll, disable the B-roll, and then I flip it. So I'll disable all of the A-roll and then enable all of the B-roll and go through one by one, color grading each clip. I'm not gonna go into how I color grade. I feel like that would be a whole nother 3 podcast episodes. So I do the color grading. Next step, I do the graphic effects, any kind of fades or wipes. I make sure they're all, If I had any before, I clean them up, or I add new ones if I like any kind of lens flare. If it's a lens flare, or if there's some kind of a picture effect, I will usually just do the sound effect while I'm doing that, while I'm making the effect. So sound effects is the next step, but like I said, some of these kind of go hand in hand. They kind of go at the same time. So if I'm doing one graphic effect, I will usually do the sound effect as well. And then one more pass through for the color to make sure everything looks nice and clean and fresh. And then it is off to the printers, send it over to the client, see what they think, and then make another timeline for all of the revisions. That's how I make a wedding video. So I hope that all made sense. If it didn't, feel free to reach out. I'd love to explain this process to anyone. If I have time, I could make a YouTube video explaining this whole thing, showing my screen. I recorded my screen, but I don't know. I didn't point too much to too many things. So that's all I got for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit, or at least kind of some light bulbs went off to things that maybe you can add to your workflow. So yeah, stay tuned. I've got a lot in store. I've got a lot of new episodes, one already filmed, and a couple new guests. Some are clients of mine, some aren't clients, but they're just homies that are wedding videographers. I'm really stoked to pick their brain and learn a little bit more. And yeah, catch you on the next one.